overwhelming. That's how FEMA Administrator Deanne Criswell described the scene in Greenfield after that deadly EF4 tornado tore through town Tuesday. Cleanup continues, but may take months. KTIV's RJ Breen joins us live tonight from Greenfield. RJ, what is the recovery effort?
Yeah, that's right, Jessica. The cleanup efforts are heavily underway down here in Greenfield. Neighbors have been helping each other out every single day. What's crazy, what I'm standing on right now was actually a garage, and all of the rubble, as you can take a look and see behind me, expands crazy amounts. Grain bins, houses, cars all toppled over, and even people helping out all over the place to get these lots cleaned up and get the recovery efforts underway. So let's take a look at some video. Neighbors here in Greenfield all helping each other out with the cleanup effort with big pieces of machinery, from bobcats to cranes, whatever they can get their hands on. The truly amazing thing to see here is just how much people are helping one another as they find lost valuables that were gone during the storm. And as I preface, Greenfield is a very small town, just over 2,000 people, where everybody and everyone knows who they are and want to lend a helping hand. I spoke with a resident who's a granddaughter of one of the residents who said she's just glad her grandmother is alive.
Came in and they yelled her name and she could hear them, and so they were yelling back and forth trying to find her. They were able to get down to the steps and get her out, and the basement was completely untouched.
Now the state is waiting to hear back on the disaster proclamation that FEMA and Governor Reynolds are working out. There is more to come with that as we speak. Jessica, back to you.
KTIV's RJ Breen live from Greenfield, Iowa tonight. Just absolute heartbreaking stories there. RJ, thanks for that live report. And as he mentioned, Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds and officials from FEMA spent the day in Greenfield touring the damage today. Now, the governor and FEMA Administrator Deanne Criswell emphasized the need to be on the ground just to fully appreciate the magnitude of this devastation and how much work is left to clean up from that massive tornado.
I was on the ground yesterday, and I can't even tell you the amount of debris that has been collected and hauled off. In some of those streets, it looked like a different place. You couldn't even see what was left of the homes in a lot of the areas, and especially the downtown area where so many homes were impacted right next to the hospital. Tremendous progress there as well.
And right now, our region is bracing for more possible dangerous storms with an enhanced severe storm risk tonight into tomorrow morning.